So I'll basically just be playing a song on either of them or both of them. First with the variations without EQ, then the LCD5 with EQ, because without EQ it's not very good. And the song I will be using is Signs of Love from the Persona 4 Golden soundtrack, because it's not copyrighted and ad revenue is always nice, I guess, even though it's like virtually nothing at this point. But yeah, so let's get started playing Signs of Love on the variations. Okay. Impact is pretty good. It all sounds a bit in my head though. Everything kind of sounds the same size. A lot of people throw out the term macrodynamic contrast. The IEM is definitely lacking in that, but the tonality is very good on the variations. For an IEM, I'd say. The treble is smooth. Bass is a bit too much, and this is one thing I want to comment on. Like, it's just too high in level, but it's kind of needed since there's no tactility in the IEM like you'd have with the headphone pushing bass in your skull or with the speaker system in your body. So it just sounds weird in the bass in that sense, like getting used to always being able to feel the bass, and it's lacking on the IEM. And you know, if I'm just walking outside or using these at the gym, it's not like that big of an issue, but for sitting down and critical listening, it just does not sound that capable, even if the tonality is good. This could like unironically be technical performance in a literal sense, with over-ear headphone being more technically capable than in IEM. It's just off, even if the tonality is good. So yeah, I'll switch to the Odyssey LCD5 with EQ now. Okay, here we go. Okay, pulling that up. The Odyssey LCD5. Okay, so let's start. I'd say the treble is not quite as smooth as it is with the variations, but for an over-ear, I'd say it's really smooth. There's more depth to the music. You can hear space around instruments better, and you can feel bass in your skull, which is an absent element with the variations. I don't know if it's because the treble is not as smooth or it's just higher in level, but it sounds marginally harsher than it does in the variations. But I do think the variations even sounds a bit darker around the 8 kHz range. It doesn't sound very, or particularly high Q on the LCD5. Like, it doesn't sound harsh, but maybe it sounds a little bit less correct in the upper treble in the variations. And the thing about needing less bass for a timbrally similar impact is that there's less masking into the upper mid-range or lower mid-range, where vocal clarity often lies. It's kind of like hard to figure out what to really do with an IEM in terms of bass, but I can really feel the bass on my skull with the LC5 EQ to Harman 2018 below 7 kHz. So we'll try Lorien, Elden Prince, Lothric, Younger Prince from the Dark Souls 3 soundtrack, and starting off with the variations. Bass impact is strong at first, not really as wide soundstage as I'd want, but imaging wise it sounds very clear. Timbre sounds very good, I'd say excellent. Treble is very smooth. You can hear the instruments clearly. The size of the instruments appears small, which I guess is the only real issue with the variations. So okay, at like 46 seconds in, you can hear this higher pitch instrument scaling in the notes, and it's like the bass is kind of overpowering what's being played, so it's not coming across as clean. So let's skip to 134. I definitely feel like the bass is a bit overpowering here. The vocals in this part. And I wanted to feel more like I'm in an orchestra or something, but the scale is not there on the variations on this song. So we'll switch to the LCD5. Okay, got to make sure to turn on the EQ here. Okay. Have it on. Let's go. So initially, the scale is much wider with this song at the beginning. I wouldn't say the treble smoothness difference is actually noticeable here. It sounds very smooth on the LCD5. Yeah, it sounds very smooth and well extended. But the scale is just so much larger. Like, just instruments that normally sounded like this large sound about like this large. I mean, maybe relative to how large the instruments actually are, it's not that big of a difference, because on a speaker system it might be like the actual size. But it is a significant difference, I'd say. More like, maybe like 10 to 15 times the size. But starting from something that small, that's kind of expected. And like I commented earlier on the variations at 45 seconds in when that higher pitch instrument started playing, I'll play that now. I don't hear any bass overpowering it, it's just clearly playing naturally. Okay, let's switch to that 135 thing. So it definitely is much closer to like I'm actually at the orchestra performance, and it's not like the soundstage is so far outside the cups or something. It's definitely like around that area, but it's much better than it being inside the head. And you also have to take into account that the ear is hearing sounds from all of the angles inside the cup, so it's actually quite a larger area than it is within IEM. Yeah, it sounds absolutely phenomenal here. I don't know if the treble difference really is just down to something else, but I'll try on a different song off camera, like a real resolving song for that area, 10 to 1 by Real, 10 to 1, okay. Maybe I'll just do it on camera too, but play a specific part. Okay, 1 second. Like, I don't know, it sounds very smooth. I wouldn't say there's really anything noticeably wrong. Maybe the slight dip at around 8200 hertz. I mean, the dip is pretty substantial in terms of amplitude, but it's very narrow, and I do think this has to do with externalization. I tried equalizing the dip out and did notice that the sound quality was slightly degraded, even though the treble technically was more linear to the eardrum, so that's something interesting. I mean, it sounds very smooth and clear here, and I can clearly hear, you know, the soundstage of the over-ear headphone, and of course the bass hitting the skull, which is just not what the IEM can do. But we're looking at the treble difference for now in particular, so we'll see what the difference is there. Okay, let's go 10 to 1 by rule, same starting point. Okay. It definitely sounds darker than the LCD5. I wouldn't say LCD5 is actually harsh at all in the treble, because even if you go into tone generator, it's smooth. It might just be higher in level because the Harman 2018 Target has more treble than this headphone does. And I do think the variation sounds a bit veiled in the 8 kilohertz range compared to even flat on-axis speakers. And I really don't think diffuse field down tilt targets are the right answer, to be honest, because the Harman target is also based on a semi-reflective room target at 3 different positions and spatially averaged. And I don't know. I would really need to see convincing data comparing a target's or a mannequin's diffuse field head related transfer function versus the Harman target and seeing what listeners preferred, because for speakers we know that listeners prefer flat on-axis sound, so, and with good reactivity, so surely what would be the most neutral then for headphones would just be the most preferred frequency response, including amplitude and phase. And maybe Harman 2019 honestly is the best target for IEMs, and it's just the difference between my ear, outer ear, and other subjects' ears or the mannequin's ears. I don't know, but there's also the interesting consideration that the statistical model for predicting listener preference for in-ears was actually higher than it is for over-ears, despite head-related transfer function differences being greater at the blocked entrance than from behind the ear or in the ear, like it would be, or like where it would be applicable for over-ear headphones. And this might also bring into question the validity of drum reference point headphone measurements, because you could think that differences would be filtered out just by listeners' own ear canals and stuff, but maybe that's really not the case, and blocked canal measurements or farther from the eardrum should be evaluated as measurement points for things like treble smoothness, just like it is for over-ear headphones. I mean, like it is for speakers, you don't measure it at people's eardrums, but there's other considerations, like with over-ear headphones being actually coupled to your head, that differences or features that would not be heard from flat on-axis speakers, which are primarily interacting with the room acoustically, you would get acoustical interactions between or caused by your eardrum and the headphone. So I really don't think it's that simple, but I tried EQing the variations to different targets, and it just could not get the mid-range and stuff to sound as like natural as the LCD5. Like it actually sounds like I'm in the performance kind of. There's just always something that feels off tonally with the variations. Like if I go to Make You Dance by Megan Trainor, like the bass is too high in quantity and the timbre of her vocals is just, this is like a very small difference. I don't think it sounds like noticeably off, but there's just something missing in the upper mid-range and treble on the variations versus an over-ear headphone that's interacting with your outer ear, giving you HRTF features. Like even just putting the LCD5 on, of course it's an open back headphone, so it sounds more open than when sound starts playing with it, like if I'm going to do now. Like sounds literally sound like they're coming from outside of my ear, and it sounds much more natural that way, and the imaging is much larger. So if I were to describe the soundstage of the LCD5, it would be like from this part of the cup to like slightly in front of my face to around here, and even like a little bit behind that area. But for vocals, it actually does sound a bit in front. Maybe it's like a bit even around, but with the variations, I could draw the same circle, but it would be starting from inside of my head and just does not sound natural. And in terms of comparing it to a speaker-like experience, I definitely say the LCD5 is much closer. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for this comparison. Take from it what you will. I still use the variations every day because, like when I go outside or something, or I'm going to the gym, I can't really use these. So yeah, I definitely think there's a place for both, but in terms of just sitting down at your desk listening to music, I definitely much rather take a good over-ear headphone. And I must really stress that it has to be a good over-ear headphone because most of them are garbage, and I had to spend so much money, $4,500, just to get something that sounded as good as the variation tonally. This is even with EQ at that, so nothing even close out of the box. So yeah, I definitely recommend taking these considerations in mind if you decide you either want to get the variations or LCD5. I'd like to give a shout out to DMS Bring Us, Ninja Coma 3, Waydaker, Mild Bill, Christopher Yu, and the RF Reaper. Thank you guys a lot for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. Be sure to join the Apple House on Discord server if you haven't. I'll see you guys next time. I'm out.